A simple woman risked her life taking a bullet for a stranger. 24 hours later, her life was changed. It was just past 6 a.m. on a gray Thursday morning in Albany, New York. Maria Alvarez, a quiet grocery store clerk with a heart far bigger than her paycheck, stepped out of her modest apartment and into the chill of early dawn. She had no idea that by the same time tomorrow, she'd be in a hospital bed with a bullet wound, and the entire country would know her name. Before we move further, please ensure to like, share, and subscribe for heartwarming stories like this. Albany moved slow in the early hours, too slow for headlines, too quiet for history. And Maria? She was the kind of person no one paid attention to. Not because she didn't matter, but because she never made herself the center of anything. She was kind without fanfare, invisible without bitterness, and strong without applause. She had once dreamed of becoming a nurse, not for status, but to help. To be someone people turned to in pain. But when her mother was diagnosed with late-stage cancer, Maria dropped everything to care for her. After her passing, there was no money, no energy, and no time left for chasing dreams. But the dream had never truly died. It was still there, aching, buried, patient. A storm was brewing outside. Thunder rumbled like a warning. Maria's eyes stayed fixed on the words in the letter. "We are pleased to offer you admission." Her fingers trembled. Her heart beat just a little faster. Could it still be possible? She didn't know that by tomorrow evening, her quiet life would be shattered by a single, reckless act of bravery. That a man with power and secrets would fall at her feet, bleeding, and she'd be the one to save him. And she certainly didn't know that cameras, reporters, and even the president would soon speak her name. But for now, Maria whispered a soft prayer, folded the letter back into the Bible, and turned out the light. She was just a grocery clerk in Albany, but fate was already on its way. By 3:17 p.m., the skies over Albany had turned a deep charcoal gray. The rain wasn't gentle, it came down in sheets, drenching the sidewalks and soaking through coats and shoes. Maria Alvarez stood at the corner of Madison and Swan, clutching a flimsy umbrella that flapped in the wind like it had given up. Her shift had ended late. The buses were delayed, and the last thing she needed was to get sick. But she waited, silent, still, and unaware that the next 60 seconds would define the rest of her life. Across the street, beneath the awning of a small cafe, two men stood in heated conversation. One was dressed in a sleek charcoal suit, his face tight with frustration. The other wore a long coat, soaked through, pacing like a wolf cornered. Maria noticed them without really noticing until something in the air shifted. A scream never uttered. A tension that snapped like lightning. In a flash, the man in the coat drew a gun. It was instinct, not thought. A reaction born of courage she never knew she had. Before the shot rang out, before the crowd understood what was happening, Maria ran. Her umbrella dropped, spinning into the gutter. Her feet pounded across the slick asphalt. She didn't know the man in the suit. She didn't even see his face. But he was in danger, and she was the only one who moved. "Gun!" Someone yelled. And then the sound, deafening, sharp, final. A single shot cracked through the chaos. Maria reached him just in time. She slammed into the man's chest, forcing him out of the line of fire. Her shoulder jerked back violently as the bullet struck. She didn't feel pain at first, just pressure, then heat, then darkness creeping in around the edges of her vision. She crumpled onto the wet pavement, her hands bloodied, her body still. Screams erupted from nearby bystanders. Cars skidded to a halt. The gunman bolted into the crowd, vanishing into the rain like a ghost. David Langston, the man in the suit, stared down at her in shock. His lips moved, but no sound came. Blood spilled from her shoulder, mixing with the rain, turning the street crimson. A woman screamed, "Call 911." A teenage boy pulled off his hoodie to press against the wound. Maria's eyes flickered open for a moment, just long enough to whisper something no one could hear. Just long enough to see David's face, ashen, horrified, guilty. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. For a moment, time bent. In the middle of the chaos, horns blaring, people shouting, there was a strange stillness. A realization, dawning like a cold sunrise. She had saved a man's life. And he would never be the same. Neither would she. Paramedics arrived within minutes. David wouldn't leave her side. His expensive shoes were soaked through, his voice shaking as he tried to explain what had happened to the officers. But nothing could explain the woman who'd run into danger for a stranger. Nothing could make sense of her selflessness. As they loaded Maria into the ambulance, her blood still fresh on the street, cameras began to flash. Someone had recorded everything. And by the time dusk fell over Albany, her story had already begun to spread. A humble grocery clerk had taken a bullet for a man she didn't know, and the world was about to find out who Maria Alvarez truly was. The first thing Maria felt was the weight, not just the weight of her body against the hospital mattress, but something heavier, something pressing on her chest like a forgotten dream come rushing back all at once. Beeping monitors echoed in the sterile white silence. Her eyes fluttered open, blurry shapes resolving into a ceiling lamp and soft footsteps nearby. Pain crept in slowly, like a tide. Her shoulder throbbed, wrapped tightly in bandages. Tubes snaked from her arms. Her throat was dry, her mind fogged. "She's awake," a nurse whispered, stepping closer with a gentle smile. "You're in Albany Medical. You were shot. You're safe now." Maria blinked slowly, piecing together shards of memory. The rain, the gun, the man, the sharp burst of pain, and then nothing. She tried to speak but couldn't find words. Her voice cracked like old paper. "Don't strain," the nurse said, adjusting her fore. "You've got a lot of people praying for you." As the nurse turned, the sound of a television drifted into the room. A newscaster's voice, crisp and serious, floated over the quiet hum of machines. The heroic woman who threw herself into harm's way to save a stranger in downtown Albany yesterday afternoon. Captured on video by a passerby, the clip has now been viewed over 2 million times in less than 12 hours. Maria turned her head toward the screen, barely believing what she saw. It was her. Grainy footage replayed the moment she sprinted across the street, the flash of the gun, the split-second collision that changed everything. A blurry close-up of her face, pale, bleeding, but alive, filled the screen with the words. "Unknown hero, grocery clerk risks life to save stranger." Maria's fingers tightened around the bedsheet. Her story was out there. Her name still unknown, but her face now public property. She wasn't sure what scared her more, the bullet that nearly ended her life, or the spotlight that had just entered it. Outside her hospital window, a storm of a different kind brewed. Reporters stood behind barricades with umbrellas and microphones. Cameras zoomed in, hoping for a glimpse of the woman who had done what most never would. Headlines blared across the internet. "Ordinary woman, extraordinary bravery." Then came the knock on the door. Soft at first, then firmer. A nurse peeked in and nodded towards someone waiting in the hall. Maria's heart skipped. David Langston stepped into the room, awkward in posture but unmistakably familiar. The man she had saved. Clean-shaven, suit tailored, but his eyes betrayed him, raw, shaken, searching. "Hi," he said quietly, approaching her bedside. "I didn't know if you'd want to see me, but I had to come." Maria didn't respond immediately. What could she say? "I don't remember your face," she said, voice hoarse. David let out a breath. "I know, but I remember yours. Every second of it." He sat in the chair beside her, rubbing his hands together nervously. "You didn't just save my life," he said, his voice breaking. "You saved something I thought I'd lost a long time ago, my faith in people. In selflessness. In goodness. I've spent years building things. Companies. Wealth. Power. But none of that ever came close to what you did for me in 3 seconds." Maria looked at him, overwhelmed. She never meant to be anyone's symbol. She had just moved. "I'm no hero," she whispered. "To me," he said, eyes steady, "you are." Tears welled in her eyes, not from pain, but from disbelief. The world outside still buzzed with noise, flashing lights, and headlines. But in that moment, within the 4 walls of a hospital room, Maria Alvarez finally began to understand. Everything had changed. And it was only the beginning. It didn't take long for the world to discover who the mystery man in the suit was. David Langston. The name alone carried weight in elite circles, printed across tech magazines, investment reports, and charity gala invites. Founder and CEO of Neural Arc, a global tech company revolutionizing artificial intelligence. Billionaire by 32. Genius. Visionary. Untouchable. Now, the headlines told a very different story. Billionaire saved by grocery clerk in Albany shooting. Within hours of Maria's story going viral, the press began digging. Photos of David at Silicon Valley conferences next to senators and celebrities flashed across news sites. Footage showed him launching clean water initiatives in Ghana, funding scholarships for underprivileged students in Detroit, shaking hands with world leaders. To the outside world, he was a symbol of success with a conscience. But what no headline could capture was the storm inside him. In the quiet of his luxury hotel suite in downtown Albany, David sat alone, his expensive suit hanging limply off his frame, the walls around him silent. He had canceled meetings, ignored calls, shut out the world. His mind was still trapped in the moment, when Maria, a complete stranger, had thrown herself in front of a bullet meant for him. He couldn't forget the impact. Her body hitting his. The crack of the gun. Her blood soaking into the sidewalk as rain poured around them. He had built empires, but nothing had ever stopped him in his tracks like that moment. And now, it haunted him. Flashbacks flickered like lightning. A teenage David, sitting alone in his father's massive study while the man barked orders into a phone. Emotions are weakness, David. Winners stay focused. A young CEO David, toasting champagne at a corporate merger, smiling for cameras while secretly wondering why the victory felt hollow. A lonely David, scrolling through social media late at night, watching real people laugh, dance, live, while he stared at screens in a penthouse. He had built a kingdom on logic, precision, and control. But in the split second that Maria acted, he saw something he hadn't felt in years, pure humanity. No strategy, no gain, just selfless instinct. And it shook him. So, he returned to the hospital, not with bodyguards or cameras this time, but quietly, humbled. He waited until visiting hours opened, then slipped into Maria's room like a man who needed permission just to breathe the same air. She looked better, color in her cheeks. Awake. Still recovering, but strong in ways he'd never be. She looked up at him with tired eyes. Back again? David smiled sheepishly. I didn't come to thank you this time, he said. I came to ask you something. Maria blinked. Ask me what? He took a breath, then pulled a folded paper from his coat. I heard about your nursing school letter. From the nurse. I hope that's okay. Her eyes widened. I'd like to pay for everything, he continued. Full tuition. Housing. Books. Whatever you need to get that degree. Maria sat speechless. Why would you do that? Because you reminded me of who I wanted to be before I got lost in everything I thought mattered. He paused, choosing his words. And because people like you should never be invisible. The rain tapped gently on the hospital window, softer than the storm the day before. Maria didn't know what to say. Gratitude? Shock? Hesitation? David smiled. No strings. Just a door. One you deserve to walk through. She looked down at the paper in his hand, then back at the man whose life she'd saved. In that moment, something shifted between them, not romance, not obligation, but recognition. Two people from entirely different worlds, connected by a moment of chaos, now rewriting each other's stories. Exactly 24 hours had passed since the shot rang out on a rainy Albany street. Maria Alvarez lay in the same hospital bed, her shoulder bandaged, her body aching, but her mind more alert now. The storm outside had passed, replaced by clear skies and a kind of calm that felt unnatural. The beeping machines around her provided the only background noise until it was interrupted by a sudden knock. Then another. And then the door swung open. In came David Langston, not alone this time, but flanked by two sharply dressed attorneys and a woman in a red blazer who introduced herself as his personal advisor. Maria blinked, trying to sit up straighter, confused by the sheer presence of them all. David stepped forward with a warm, almost reverent expression. He looked different, less polished, more human. He pulled up a chair beside her and set a sleek folder on her tray table. I told you I wanted to help, he began gently. This isn't charity. It's a partnership. And this, he tapped the folder, is your full scholarship to nursing school. Paid in full. Housing. Supplies. Living stipend. Whatever you need. And when you graduate, there's a job waiting for you at the Langston Foundation. Maria's lips parted, stunned. I don't know what to say. Say yes, he replied, smiling. You changed my life. I just want to give you the tools to change yours and others. Before Maria could respond, a nurse popped her head in, eyes wide. Maria? You have more visitors. More? In came the mayor of Albany, wearing a navy suit and holding a bouquet of tulips. Miss Alvarez, he began with a broad smile. It is my distinct honor to recognize you for your extraordinary bravery and service to this city. You didn't just save a man's life. You reminded all of us what real courage looks like. He handed her a plaque embossed with the city's seal. Cameras flashed from the hallway. Journalists peeked through the glass. A crowd had formed outside the hospital, people holding signs that read, Thank you, Maria, and Our hometown hero. Maria's pulse raced. Her hands shook. Just 24 hours ago, she was a nobody waiting in the rain for a late bus. Now, the world was watching her breathe. And then, as if the moment couldn't stretch any further, the hospital phone rang. A nurse answered, then turned to Maria with disbelief. "It's the White House." Maria blinked. "The what?" Moments later, a staffer handed her the receiver. A crisp voice came through the line. "Miss Alvarez, this is President Evelyn Moore. I just wanted to thank you personally for your courage and sacrifice. People like you remind us what makes this country great. And on behalf of a grateful nation, I'm awarding you the National Civilian Medal of Bravery." Maria couldn't speak. Tears filled her eyes. Her chest ached, not from the wound, but from the overwhelming surge of it all. The president's voice softened. "You've inspired millions, Maria, and you've earned every blessing that's coming your way." By the time the call ended, the room was quiet again. But Maria wasn't the same woman who had opened her eyes that morning. David leaned in, voice low. "Are you ready for the life you deserve?" Maria looked down at the folder, the plaque, the ringing phone, and the open window where sunlight now spilled onto her blanket. She'd lived a quiet life, an invisible life, but fate had knocked, and this time, she was ready to open the door. The sun rose over Albany with the crisp promise of autumn, its golden light casting long shadows across the city campus. Maria Alvarez stepped out of a cab, a single suitcase in one hand, a bag of books slung over the other. She stood at the entrance to the student housing complex, her heart pounding, not from fear, but from something she hadn't felt in years: hope. At 29, Maria was older than the other students bustling past her, earbuds in, coffee in hand, full of noisy, youthful energy. She looked out of place in her thrift store jeans and second-hand coat, but her eyes held something many of them didn't: resolve. She climbed the stairs to her tiny dorm room, smaller than her old apartment, but filled with possibility. A desk, a bed, a bulletin board waiting for photos and notes. She pinned up her nursing school acceptance letter, now framed. Next to it, she tacked the hospital photo of her with the mayor, the president's handwritten note, and a single quote in black ink: "Be the reason someone believes in goodness." Cut to a fast-paced montage. Maria in a classroom, surrounded by students 10 years younger, taking furious notes while a professor lectures on anatomy. Maria in the library until midnight, highlighter in hand, pages filled with scribbled questions. Maria comforting a crying classmate before an exam. Maria holding a mannequin's hand in a clinical simulation lab, rehearsing her bedside manner with tenderness and care. She wasn't the smartest. She wasn't the fastest. But she was the most determined. And soon, that quiet determination became contagious. She began volunteering during lunch breaks, tutoring struggling students. She formed a late-night study group for single moms in her cohort. She paid for one classmate's textbook out of her own stipend. Word spread. Her name became synonymous with generosity and grit. Meanwhile, she had started part-time work at the Langston Foundation, as promised. But she didn't just file papers or take notes. Maria dove in. She sat in on meetings, spoke with underprivileged women facing the same obstacles she once did. She listened, truly listened, to stories of sacrifice, shame, and survival. And then she helped design a program that would change lives. The Maria Initiative. A scholarship fund. A mentorship network. An empowerment platform for women who had been written off, overlooked, or forced to choose survival over education. It started with 5 women. Then 50. Then 1,000. And every time someone asked why she did it, Maria simply said, "Because someone once saw something in me, when I couldn't see it myself." Back on campus, Maria's days were long and exhausting. There were failures. 1 C- on a lab test almost broke her confidence. But she kept going, one foot in front of the other, until the grades improved, until the confidence came, until the white lab coat didn't feel like it belonged to someone else. One evening, while locking up the foundation office, David stopped her. "You know this, what you're doing, it's not small," he said. "You've created something bigger than either of us imagined." Maria smiled softly, not out of pride, but gratitude. "It was never about being seen," she said. "It was about making sure others didn't stay invisible." Cut to her walking alone under the campus lights, her reflection shimmering in a fountain. The girl who once lived in the shadows was now building pathways for others to walk freely in the light. This wasn't the life she expected. It was better, and it had only just begun. The stage lights shone bright, casting a warm halo over the podium as a hush fell over the crowd. Rows of folding chairs were filled with proud families, teary classmates, and city officials who had come to witness the moment. At center stage stood Maria Alvarez, no longer the quiet grocery clerk, no longer the woman bleeding on a rainy street, but a graduate, in a crisp white gown, holding her nursing certificate with trembling hands. Applause erupted, camera shutters clicked, and in the front row, David Langston rose to his feet, clapping with pride. He wasn't alone. Several of the scholarship recipients from Maria's Foundation initiative sat beside him, eyes wide, inspired by the very woman who had once been just like them. Maria approached the microphone. Her hands were steady, but her breath caught for just a second. Then she began, her voice clear, grounded, and unmistakably her own. "I never imagined that a single act of courage would lead me here," she said. "I didn't think I was extraordinary. I didn't even think I was brave. I was just someone who saw someone else in danger and moved." She paused, eyes scanning the crowd. "My whole life, I believed that to matter, to make a difference, you had to be someone important. Someone with power or money or a voice loud enough to reach the world. But standing here today, I realize that it's not volume that changes lives. It's heart. It's showing up. It's acting, even when no one is watching." Her voice wavered slightly as she continued. "A bullet could have ended my life that day. Instead, it gave me a new one. One filled with purpose, with service, and with community. And I will never forget that it all began in the rain, with nothing in my hands but a broken umbrella. And everything in my heart." Tears shimmered in the eyes of strangers and friends alike. The auditorium rose to a standing ovation. Cut to a new day. Maria walks the quiet halls of a hospital now, not as a patient, but as a nurse. Her scrubs are neatly pressed, her ID badge clipped to her pocket. The bustle of the emergency room surrounds her, but she moves with calm certainty. A child clutches her hand. An elderly woman thanks her for listening. A new nurse asks her for help, and Maria smiles, stepping in without hesitation. The woman who once walked unnoticed through the world now moves with gravity and grace. She volunteers on weekends at community clinics. Her foundation's mentorship program now spans 3 cities. Women she's helped write her letters filled with gratitude, stories of their own rebirths, each one echoing the legacy Maria never set out to create, but humbly embraces. Outside the hospital, it begins to rain. Maria stops at the entrance, watching the drops fall against the pavement. She sees a young woman waiting without an umbrella, soaked, clutching a backpack to her chest. Without a word, Maria walks over and covers her with her own. It's a small gesture. No cameras. No headlines. But Maria knows better than anyone now this is where real stories begin. As she walks back inside, her silhouette disappears into the light, not as a victim, not as a symbol, but as a woman who proved that courage, no matter how simple, has the power to reshape destiny. And sometimes, to change the world. Don't forget to hit that like button, hit subscribe, and turn on notifications. Share this video. Thank you.